was one of the videos.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Margaret Flowers. I'm one of the outgoing national chairs of the co-chairs of the Green Party of the United States. Today, July 11th, 2020, we have just concluded our Green Party presidential nominating convention, our first time having a virtual convention due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we got through it happily without too many glitches. And we successfully nominated a vice president and presidential candidate for the 2020 election, Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker, with almost 60% of the delegates in our competition that had a pretty wide field. So very exciting to have that result and have them representing us as the president and vice presidential candidates today. Our national spokesperson, Trahern Cruz, I don't think is able to make it. He was having some difficulties technically. If he joins us, we can invite him to say a few words, but I think that we should move in to the candidates. This is why you're here. And what I'll do is introduce Howie and Angela. We'll ask them to say a few words, and then we'll open it up to questions. And if you'd like to ask a question, please do use the raise your hand feature. You'll find that if you click on the participants icon at the bottom of the screen. If you move your cursor to the bottom, you'll find that, and you'll find the raise hand feature. If you're not able to do that, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself, and when there's a pause, speak up and say that you'd like to ask a question. So I see that Eric has already raised his hand. That's great. So you're first in line. So let me introduce Angela first and ask you to say a few words, and then I'll introduce Howie. So Angela Walker is an independent socialist who describes herself as a Fred Hampton, Assata Shakur socialist. She was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to a working class Black family. She learned early that though money was necessary to live in this society, it was less important than integrity, cooperation, and dignity. This upbringing shaped the activist and organizer that she became, and you can read her full bio, an excellent bio. She's a mother and a grandmother and a truck driver at the howiehawkins.us website. So Angela, would you like to make a few comments?
Hey, good afternoon to everybody. I am really, really excited right now. I'm very, very grateful for the delegates and their support. I'm grateful for how well this conference went. It was very, very well done, and I want the folks who put it together to know that, and I think I speak for Howie when I say this, they did an excellent, excellent job. So thank y'all for, making that happen, and also thank y'all, everyone who's currently present. Thank you for being here.
Great, thank you for that, Angela. Let me now introduce Howie Hawkins. Howie Hawkins is the original Green New Dealer, the first U.S. candidate to campaign for a Green New Deal in 2010. He's also one of the original Greens in the United States, having participated in the first national meeting to organize the Green Party of the United States in St. Paul, Minnesota in August of 1984. Hawkins became active in the movement for civil rights and against the war in Vietnam as a teenager. He is a lifelong activist, a member of the working class, and a scholar and a socialist. And you can also read his full and impressive bio at howiehawkins.us. Howie?
Thank you, and I want to second again Angela's thanks to the people that put on the convention. I know those people got a lot of grief, a lot of pressure, and they pulled it off beautifully, and I know they worked hard. So, all thanks to them, as well as Green parties around the country that hold together, these primaries in difficult circumstances on the fly as the COVID lockdown happened. What it means, I talked about in my speech, how we're living in a failed state. The two-party corporate state has failed. And I went through 5 life or death issues: the COVID pandemic, the racism pandemic, the climate crisis, inequality in the new nuclear arms race. And I think the Greens just showed by pulling off this convention, hey, like we said, let's put a couple of workers up there in the White House. In place of those grifters, we'll put a better class of people up in there. Angela and I know, unlike Trump, who says he knows everything about everything and knows nothing about anything that matters, we know what we don't know and where we need help, and we would get it. So I just think at that level alone, we showed, the first time I was ever quoted on national network was when we occupied Seabrook and we had a demonstration in support of those in the National Guard armies. And I blurted out, the Clamshell Alliance is better organized than the state of New Hampshire. And we were. I think we can do a better job than these two old parties who've been up in there and failing on, they can't solve anything. So those are my opening remarks.
Great, thank you, Howie and Angela. So now we'll take some questions, and could you please identify yourself with your name and your media outlet? And the first is Eric, and I think that you'll have to unmute yourself. Hopefully you can do that.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Two quick questions are, Howie, you were there at the beginning of the Green Party decades and decades ago. Has the party progressed in the way that you would have foreseen, or are things going a lot slower than you expected? That's question one, a perspective question. And then question two is, how are you going to campaign? Are you going to be focusing on specific states? Are you going to be 100% social media? I mean, what is your plan for campaigning? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
You know, I really didn't have an expectation. I've been in so many movements where we've been in the minority, sometimes for decades, usually not that long. I mean, when we started protesting the Vietnam War in 65, 66, and 67, we were a small, vilified minority. And then after the Tet Offensive, people flipped. I mean, I grew up in a community with a lot of auto workers, and those guys were World War II veterans, very patriotic. And then they began having their doubts, but suddenly, just like a school of fish suddenly makes a turn another way, they all came out against the war. And I've been through that in so many movements. And that's the way I look at this. You know, when you're in these struggles, all you need, and there's a great Debs quote I can't recall right now. I said, but all you need to be at peace with is your own evaluation of what's right. And then whatever the circumstances, you're going to be all right. And then, you know, the thing is, you lose until you win. And I think that's the way we look at it. So, you know, I really didn't have a timeline. And, you know, we're up against the world's second most enthusiastic capitalist party, as a conservative once called the Democratic Party, and the world's most enthusiastic capitalist party, the Republicans. And they're the two richest parties, and the Democrats are the oldest party. And we're in a political system unlike any other electoral democracy that tries to keep third parties off the ballot. So we have a lot of obstacles. But here we are 35 years later, and we are the independent left voice on the ballot. And it's there if there's an independent left in this country, if it finally figures out that, you know, working inside the Democratic Party is a way, you know, you don't change the Democratic Party changes you. You know, Bernie Sanders showed us. He got elected to mayor of Burlington and the Congress member from Vermont, and then a senator from Vermont running as an independent. And then he ran as a Democrat and the establishment cut him off. So the lesson there is run as an independent. We can win. How are we going to campaign this election? Well, we say every state is a battleground state for the Green Party. You know, what they call battlegrounds like Ohio and Pennsylvania, for the Green Party members in those states, there are no Democrats helping them fight fracking and fossil fuel infrastructure. In Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, the Democrats helping the Green Party fight Enbridge Line 5, which goes across the northern parts of those states, a lot of it on native land. Very few Democrats, particularly any Democrats up north. It's the Green Party, and those are battleground states. And in every state, when we're fighting affordable housing, it's usually we're fighting the Democratic machine, which is financed by the real estate industry, that is more interested in upscale housing than affordable housing. So, you know, we find that we're on the other side of the Democrats in every state. And there's no way we're going to abandon the Greens in Pennsylvania fighting fracking, or the Greens in Philly fighting for affordable housing, just because it's a battleground state. A friend of mine, Akili Kali Akuno down in Mississippi, we were talking about this, and he said, yeah, the Democrats want us to give them sacrifice zones. We're not doing that. So we're going to fight for every vote in every state.
Thank you, Howie. Angela, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just thinking about how we're going to campaign, I think our campaign is going to continue in the way that most things are continuing in this country. Everybody's gonna have to, we're gonna have to be flexible. We're gonna have to be creative. And, you know, of course, you know, Howie and I both agree that there's nothing like a face-to-face conversation with people where you can, you know, there's that energy exchange that happens. When I think there's going to be opportunities that where it is safe for both us and for the people that we want to interact with, if that can happen, it will happen. I think a lot of things are still going to be virtual, a lot of social media, things like that, but we're going to be very creative with this campaign as much as possible.
Thank you. Next, let's go to Rebecca McCarthy. And Rebecca, if you could please state which outlet you're with, that would be great. And let me get you unmuted.
Thanks very much. I'm with a small magazine that's launching. It's from a former editor at Long Reads. It's called The End of the World Review. It's a newsletter. But congratulations to both of you, Howie and Angela. Those were great speeches. I was wondering, as far as like your vision of a Green Deal, if there was a way you differentiate yourself from what the Sanders campaign put forward, especially like what your feelings on carbon capture and storage were, because I know they were really trying to stay away from that because they just saw that as a like a ploy for the oil industry to continue operating. I was wondering if you shared that opinion.
I think Bernie Sanders was the only Democrat with a serious proposal. Wasn't as good as ours. He was going to get to zero emissions by 2050, but it was ambitious enough that he wanted to get the power and transportation sectors to zero emissions by 2030. He was 16.3 trillion over 10 years. We're 27.5 trillion. And we looked at his numbers and we figured the reason for the difference is he was getting manufacturing, agriculture, and buildings to zero emissions by 2050. So it's a slower pace. He also did at least the power through the public sector, Federal Energy Administration, which we think is essential to make the rapid transition. We got to do public enterprise and planning to basically make this happen in a decade. So, and he pointed out, which we agreed, that, you know, how are you going to pay for it? Well, we're going to have to borrow money, invest up front. We're going to have to reprioritize the federal budget and tax the rich more, but that's a good investment. And in the long run, it will pay off. As he pointed out with energy, we're talking about public housing units, transportation fares, energy, leasing, Green New Deal factories to worker cooperatives, and other sources of revenue. Like any good business investment, it pays for itself once it starts generating revenue. So he had that piece. So that was all good. It was just a little slower than ours. As far as carbon capture goes, that's where Biden is. He has no right to call what he's talking about a Green New Deal. I mean, he wants to keep fracking the hell out of the country, powering electricity with natural gas, too slow phase out of gasoline engines for vehicles. And then he wants to capture the carbon out of these gas power plants with a technology that is not yet proven economical. And then you got to pump the carbon underground. So we're not for that. We can do solar and wind and other renewable sources of energy that are clean. We do want to draw carbon out of the atmosphere, but that's where our Green New Deal has a 4 million person strong civilian conservation corps to plant forests, to rebuild soils, to restore habitat, particularly carbon intensive habitat like wetlands and mangroves and that kind of thing. And so we are concerned. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which I said at a conservative estimate in my speech, they basically assumed that mid-century we're going to have a way of drawing carbon out of the atmosphere with technologies that haven't been proven. We got to start that now, because even if we get to zero emissions, we're going to keep emitting carbon. Like the oceans absorb carbon, and it's going to be emitting carbon for centuries, from all the industrial era carbon that was absorbed by the ocean. So, that's a serious problem. But we're not talking about burning fossil fuels and grabbing the carbon and putting it in the ground. Mm-hmm. That is uneconomical and is just not, it's going to get us down the wrong path. That's not a bridge to the future. That's a bridge off a cliff.
Great. Angela, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think Howie's pretty comprehensive with it.
Okay, great. Next up, I have David Rockello. Let's get you unmuted. And if you could please state which media outlet you're with.
Okay. Hi, David Rockello from killradio.org. Congratulations to the two candidates. What I'd like to know is your media strategy. How are you going to get onto those Sunday shows, Amanpour and Company, and other petroleum corporate media? How are you going to get out there so we can all see you on regular television? In addition, I just want to say again, congratulations and all the best.
Well, I'll say briefly, we'll keep, like I did in my speech, calling them out for being state media stenographers for the two-party corporate state. And if they're real journalists, professional journalists, you know, we do know they're reporters and hosts of some of these shows that want us, but higher up, the editors, the producers, and higher up probably in their corporate hierarchy, they say no. So we're gonna call them out and expose them and shame them. We're getting covered by German, Indian, Spanish, Moroccan, Australian, Russian. I mean, everybody in the world's covering us but the damn American media. So let's just shame them and hopefully they got some sense of conscience. I don't know what your thoughts are, Angela.
Basically the same thing, and it's really funny that you said that, because one of the things that my aunt was yelling at me about is, y'all need to get on media in this country, and if they won't cover you, go around the world. That's basically what we're ending up doing. And so, you know, just continuing to reach out to domestic media outlets. I mean, I've, you know, done pretty well with speaking with, you know, much smaller audiences, but as far as like getting to, you know, like you said, the Sunday stuff, we're just like, how we say, we have to shame them. It's like everyone is talking to us but you. Everyone in the world knows about this campaign but you. What do you look like?
Hi, my name is Kevin Zeese. I'm Howie's and Angela's press secretary. So let me comment on this question a little bit. What we're doing already in this campaign is developing a grassroots network of activists working with the campaign to spread the word. When we get some media coverage, these activists will put it out on social media and let people know it's happening so that we magnify our impact. Howie has already been on in the Hill magazine twice. He's been on Hill TV Rising, which has a very large audience of 600,000 viewers. And it's a lot of ex-Sanders people, because one of the hosts is a burner. And he's been on a bunch of big podcasts. The media scene has changed a lot. Already, Howie and Angela have reached probably hundreds of thousands of voters through podcasts and independent media. And we have a very strong social media team. And I think, as Angela and Howie said, we have to shame them. And one way you shame them is you have a network of word that so the whole world knows you exist, and the media loses credibility by not covering you. They already have a credibility problem, and if they don't cover something that people know about, Howie was on C-SPAN this morning, he'll be on C-SPAN again tonight. So that's millions of viewers right there. And so the corporate media will have no choice. You know, when we organized the Occupy movement back in 2010, 2011, we didn't send a press release to the corporate media because we knew that if they covered us, they would cover us unfairly, and that our job, we didn't is that we listed a lot of independent media, people's media, and this is a people's campaign. When that people's media covered Occupy, the corporate media had no choice but to cover it, and to cover it honestly. And that's what we're going to do here as well. It's a bottom-up campaign, grassroots, media power, people power is what's going to get us in the corporate media as well. Oh, one more point, and Howie didn't mention this, but we're also challenging the uber capitalist Donald Trump to a lifelong socialist, Howie Hawkins. Let's see if this capitalist is a coward or if he has the courage to actually debate a socialist. We're going to make that challenge very public and see what kind of player Donald Trump is. He may think he could beat Hawkins in a debate. He can't. And so we're going to make that debate challenge very aggressively. Over.
And also clarify that Trump's got the wrong guy he's calling a socialist. It's not Joe Biden.
This is David Rockello, Kill Radio. Again, got a little flustered. I forgot to ask, what's your plan? And I'd like to hear from Angela first this time. What's your plan to get all those Bernie supporters, like the people from the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, those undecided socialists, and what's your plan for that?
Speak to them about issues, which is a lot of what has been happening actually, where people are undecided, is particularly on my social media and more on my Twitter than anything else. But people are undecided, people are disillusioned, people are, you know, they need somewhere to be, and they need a home, they need representation, and just speaking with them about issues and letting them know that if you were someone who supported Bernie Sanders, you supported him for reasons. One of those big reasons is Medicare for all. And so when we lay out, you know, I discuss our full strength, basically, Medicare for all, which is a community controlled national health service versus having, you know, private administrators, you know, putting their hands in it, which makes it, you know, something that is accountable to the people who are using it. It just reminds them, okay, well, you know, the policies that you are putting forth are the ones that I still support. And, you know, it's just speaking to people about issues is pretty much the way that I've been handling that.
Yeah, we are going to Bernie Sanders groups like Our Revolution and others, and, you know, DSA local chapters. The national committee's made it clear they're not going to endorse in the presidential race, but, you know, this is the old strategy, united front from below. You go talk to the rank and file, and some of the organized groups are responding positively, others are not, but there's a discussion going on. And of course, you know, our basic argument to those people is, I say, don't get lost in the sauce. You vote for Biden, and everything you stood for with Sanders disappears because you voted for Biden. You didn't vote for Medicare for all. You voted for Biden. You vote for the Greens, you're voting for Medicare for all. And the other good things that Bernie Sanders stood for. So, you know, don't silence yourself. Make yourself heard in this election. Don't waste your vote. Vote for the Greens.
Next, we'll go to Mike Feinstein.
I don't know Mike Gams.
No, Mike Feinstein.
Gams
Yeah,
is longer.
Hi, everybody. Mike Feinstein, political columnist for the Santa Monica Daily Press, and my Southern California colleague before David Riccello did already ask you about how to get more media, which was a direction I was going to go in as well. And let me phrase it this way. Howie made a very passionate appeal during his acceptance speech about why media should cover this campaign based on the issues. And then Angela talked about how dynamic it is to be talking to people in person. I'm wondering whether this campaign is thinking about cutting and pasting that couple minutes from the convention speech and doing things like tweeting it out to individual journalists around the country. We're normally used to the press release that we send out, and then we don't hear from them, and we wonder why they don't respond to our press releases. And we're in a different era today. So does this party and this campaign think about maybe using media strategies like that to reach journalists and to reach their hearts? Over.
Yeah, we do. You just gave us a good idea. And we're trying to reach the media, the political reporters. We've got a list of them around the country, and we're hitting them with news releases, but also tweets and other social media. And I read books, so I'm not the guy that can tell you how we do that, but we got these young guys that Kevin was talking about, and young men and women that are, you know, getting the word out. And so that's definitely part of our media strategy.
Yeah, and it's also, something that I'll tweet something and like my followers pick it up and, they tag news outlets and things like that too. So yeah, that's an excellent idea.
Great. Next we have Mike Gams, and let me get you unmuted. Please state what outlet you're with.
Hey, thank you. I'm Mike Gams. I'm here today representing the Justice League of Queers, which is an online queer anarchist media collective with over 20,000 followers online. And we're part of a larger network of queer radical leftist shit posters on the internet, including other pages like Fully Automated Luxury Gay Space Communism and I'm Here, I'm Queer, and the bourgeoisie should live in fear. Our follower base is made up of a lot of people that aren't in the Green Party, particularly queer people who felt that Bernie was the compromise, right? He was the compromise because he voted in favor of things like Sesta Fosta, which is an attack on sex workers, and sanctions in Venezuela, and things like that. So I guess I have a two-part question. First one, I guess, would be for Angela. What are you doing to help show that this campaign and this party is a safe space for queers, particularly ones who've never been involved with the Green Party before? And I guess for Howie, for those people who feel that Bernie was the compromise, what are you doing to show that we don't need to compromise? So, over.
Well, to answer your question, hey, Mike, I identify as queer. And so one of the biggest, most important things with this campaign is, as I said in my acceptance speech, that our party needs to be a flourishing and welcoming space for all of us along the LGBTQIA rainbow and all of those places where we intersect with race, with gender expression or non, with physical ability or different ability, all of those things, age, everything that we bring into it. And being vocal about that, being very intentional in our chapters, in our spaces, places where we come together, and making sure that we are aware of who is in the room. We are talking through, places where people may feel uncomfortable. Because there's a lot of people, particularly in, certain places where they're not used to being around diversity. And, we've got folks in our party who, have been doing things a certain way for a very long time. And it's going to call for us to be compassionate. It's going to call for us to be curious in a good way. And I mean that in like the yogic way versus, the kind of morbid curiosity where you want to poke at things. Not that. So it's going to call for us to just be open-hearted. And I know that sounds like really touchy-feely and squishy, but I think if there's a time that we've ever lived in that really demands compassion, this is it. And so I think that we are just going to have to, as a party, be willing to be open-minded and to understand that this is a party that has to be, because no one else is doing what we're doing. No one else is bringing the message that we're bringing. And if we are talking about the world that we want to create, we have to start right here. I mean, it starts with self, and then it starts with our party. We can't put this into the larger world if we are not doing this within our party. And so just making sure that we are meeting people where they are, and we are doing so with open minds and open hearts and sincerity, because I don't play that, I tolerate. You can keep that. This is not about tolerance. Either we're going to be comrades or we're not. So that's where I am with that.
Well, I don't think the compromise like Bernie was. We go way beyond Bernie, particularly on foreign and military policy. I mean, he didn't want to deal with that. He was kind of tone deaf on racial justice issues, wouldn't touch reparations for African Americans. And we I mean, that's so obvious, you know, as I mentioned in my speech. You just do the last 10 years, Black America lost half its wealth because these corporate criminals were stealing people's homes. And 2 of them are in the Trump administration. That's Mnuchin in Treasury and Wilbur Ross in the Commerce Department. You know, he was at the center of the robo-signing, computerized fraud to steal people's homes. And the Obama administration didn't prosecute them. And people want to tell us that we got to stand aside for the Democrats to get rid of Trump. You know, what was the reason we're supposed to vote for the Democrats again? They couldn't even fight these people that were stealing people's homes. So, yeah, there's a lot there. You mentioned Venezuela. You know, we should lift the sanctions on Venezuela. They're in trouble. You know, their oil industry's not working. They're dealing with a COVID pandemic. There's all kinds of problems. Let's be a humanitarian power instead of a bully, you know, telling them who their president should be, like we got a right to. And it's not just Bernie, it's the whole damn Democratic Party. When Trump put Guaido up there in the gallery at the State of the Union address and then gave him his props, every video I've seen is every Democrat was giving him a standing ovation like every Republican. You know, that is like US imperialism, bipartisan, right in front of your eyes. And then the sex work question. We're for decriminalization on a New Zealand model so that both the person purchasing the sex and the person getting paid for the sex or whatever the service is, it's not criminal. It's between consenting adults. You still want to go after trafficking and, you know, underage and so forth, but we're not talking about the Nordic model where the person receiving the money isn't prosecuted, but the person giving the money is, which brings the person who's delivering the service into the criminal justice system anyway. And that's a BS solution. So that's where we stand on that. And Bernie, you know, I think when it comes to the social issues, he's a little bit shy of really deciding, you know, the way we decide things is what's good for the people, what's right, not what's popular. I mean, the Democrats are known as the socially liberal party, but how did they move on gay marriage? They chased public opinion on that one. It was the Green Party that led. It was Jason West and Rebecca Rotzler in New Paltz that started marrying couples in 2003. And it was the Democratic Attorney General that got an injunction against them. They called him the Sheriff of Wall Street, Eliot Spitzer, the big liberal. Turns out he was paying for sex with a credit card. He got caught. I mean, the arrogance of that guy just to set himself up like that. Man, oh man. So anyway, like I said, you know, Angela and I are working people. We'll put a better class of people up there in the White House and bring some common sense.
Great, thank you. Next we have Monte Letourneau, and let me get you unmuted. And please state what media outlet you're with.
With no commercial affiliation, I call it the All Insane Green Party Critical Partisan Tattletales Brigade. And I kind of have a two-parter. First of all, I haven't heard much about Palestine today. And I'd like to have you, preferably both of you, just quick comment on the general situation there. But really, I have a statement I want to ask you to comment on. In my opinion, for a couple of years now, I'm very much getting in the habit of saying we've crossed all the tipping points. I'm getting very sick of professionals, scientists, science reporters, even Jill Stein, referring to things I have pretty much made my peace with are behind us as in the future tense. And so I just want to like, you know, lay out the general concept that models have frequently predicted for 2050, something that happens a couple years later. 2015, we hit the 2050 published in 2013 by the UN for acidification of the ocean. Granted, we came up with a better way to measure it as well. But we've got tundra burning and melting and releasing gas at a much faster rate than we know. We've got fracking, cracking, open the earth and leaking its gas out much faster than I think we have any idea. And now the Gulf Coast stream is bumping up as it disperses, bumping up against the steepest continental shelves off the fjords, where the most serious methane hydrate deposits are.
Monty,
just,
can you kind of wrap up your point, please?
In terms of the gravity of that situation, any comments? No, I'm not being nice, but I'm also concerned.
Well, I'll
What
start.
you're looking, go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the climate models, you're basically right. The climate scientists come up with a model and then they check and they find out we're headed toward disaster faster. And part of that is that the scientific community tends to be conservative, tries to stay out of politics, particularly with this international or intergovernmental panel on climate change, because their studies got to get approved by the petro states before they're released. And so they tend to go on the conservative side. The best science is being done by people, like Kevin Anderson at the Tisdale Center and Schellenbacher, I think, or Berger in the Potsdam Center, and even James Hansen and his people that were at NASA and now at Columbia. Their predictions have been better than the International Panel on Climate Change. But even they're getting surprised, because the thing they worry about are those tipping points where you get a positive feedback, where the more it happens, the worse it gets. Like the tundra melting, you reach that point, then the methane and the carbon is released into the atmosphere, which heats it up faster, then more tundra melts, and you're in this vicious cycle. And looks like we're hitting those. Like the solar ice cap, the snow reflects heat. The dark ocean absorbs it. And, we have almost ice-free summers up there now, or we're getting there, very close, which is a positive feedback loop, a vicious circle. So we have, that's why we're saying, no, don't wait till 2050, a decade. I mean, engineers tell us it's going to take a decade to build all this stuff under the best of circumstances. Well, that's what we got to try to do. And no model can accurately predict. The better we do, the better we'll be protected. But we're in trouble. And then on Palestine, until the Palestinian people's rights are respected by the state of Israel, I believe we got to start doing like we did against South African apartheid, start imposing sanctions. And the National BDS Committee in Palestine says the next thing we need to do is start pulling military aid. And the question immediately, which could be a trigger for that, is if Israel goes ahead with its plan to annex all the settlements on the West Bank. But if they don't do that formally, they've already done it practically. And so I think that it's a terrible situation, and the U.S. should stop giving Israel a blank check to do whatever the hell it wants to the Palestinians. That's just an immoral position that we cannot abide.
Angela, did you have anything to add? I know you're muted. Wait, let's get you unmuted.
My neighbors just decided to start living their best life with their music again, so I had to make some adjustments. Otherwise, y'all gonna hear that too. As far as hey, they've been doing it all day. As far as Palestine goes, I'm a Black American. I understand what it is to live under a state that treats you like a second-class citizen. And so one of the things that the Black Lives Matter movement for Black Lives has always done is express its solidarity with Palestine. And that is, as Howie said, our position as well with our campaign, and thinking that, sanctions need to be imposed against Israel in the way that they were against South Africa to end the apartheid and to show that we do not support that. So that's one thing. And as far as what you were talking about with the environment, I think one of the things that you were looking for is a sense of urgency, that for us, this thing is immediate. Climate grief is real. And frankly, we don't have time to, sit and tinker around in the way that, the two parties, well, basically the one party, because the Republicans don't even talk about it, but we don't have any time to be playing with this. This is immediate, and this is part of the reason that we need to get this out here.
Great. Next we have Ann Garrison. And Ann, if you can state which media outlet you're with, please.
I'm with Pacifica Radio, most often KPFA Radio, although we've been doing a national broadcast called COVID-19 Race and Democracy recently. Also the Black Agenda Report and several other text publications. I have one domestic question and one about foreign policy, and then probably a few sub-questions. With regard to domestic policy, for years, we've heard just enormous emphasis on diversity. And the Democratic Party has made identity politics and racial and gender diversity its banner. But I've never heard anyone make an argument, as you seem to do, for representation of the working class being part of the diversity that's needed in, excuse me, that's needed in politics. I want to applaud that and ask you to say something further about it and about how you'll try to get that point across, to expand the idea of diversity to include the working class.
Well, I would say, and we got this written down somewhere, we're not just about diversity, we're about equality. You can sprinkle in some Black faces in high places and some other marginalized groups and keep a very unequal system in place where the masses of Black people and other marginalized people stay oppressed and exploited. And the Democrats, that's their game. They sort of have this meritocratic system. Well, Barack Obama made it, Susan Rice made it. If you didn't make it, well, that's your own damn fault. Go back to school. That is the subtext to the Democrats, sort of meritocratic standard. That's why their mass base is the professional managerial class. And they don't really know how to talk to the working class. That's why the working class stay home and don't vote. Because Hillary Clinton epitomized that. A lot of working class people, she looked to them like that suit at Human Relations. When you're injured and you go in there and say, I need workers' comp, and they say, no, we're not going to get that to you. Go get disability. You got that insurance, which pays half as much as the workers' comp would. That's the kind of person they see there. That's what the Democratic Party looks like to a lot of working class people. So we need to talk about equality, not just diversity. And that's within, the identities that people organize around to overcome their oppression. That's, and then the class question, of course, we want to do away with, basically do away with classes. Everybody should, when they work, they should get the full fruit of their labor, but there shouldn't be a group of people that's living off the labor of other people. That's called exploitation, whether it's slavery, feudalism, capitalism. We're not for that.
I was just going to chime in that thinking about the fact that the working class makes up most of this country. And people, one of the things that I've heard from people in talking to them, even before I ever thought of running for office or anything like that, how many times have you heard people say, we need somebody who understands, we need someone in the White House or someone highly placed to make legislation that understands truly what it is to be us. And so I think one of the most valuable things about this campaign, I still drive a truck. Howie is a retired worker. We know what it is to have to live day to day earning a paycheck. We know what it is, especially with my, the work that I do. I am affected by climate change. When I live in South Carolina, when we have a tropical storm come through here and we're dumping inches and inches of rain, that means I don't work. I don't get paid for that. So this is a very, very real thing to me. The things that we're looking at facing, where folks in this country are facing evictions and, going without medical insurance. These are things that we know about, that we can speak to. It's not some vicarious, experience that we cite that somebody else had. This is something we know intimately. And I think that's one of the values that we bring to this.
Okay, can I go on to my foreign policy question?
Mhm.
Okay, in 2016, I spoke to Edward S. Herman, the late great Edward S. Herman, the co-author with Noam Chomsky of Manufacturing Consent. And he departed from his co-author, Noam Chomsky, quite significantly, and he has done that consistently, excuse me. And the difference is that Chomsky says we have to vote for the lesser evil. Edward S. Herman said that he would do what Kant had said, which is do what you would have generalized, and particularly that the Green Party is necessary to articulate a foreign policy alternative to that of the Democrats and the Republicans, which is more or less the same, although the Democrats is at times seems to be even worse. So can you tell me how you would do that? Articulate an alternative foreign policy.
Well, basically, we want to end the U.S. global military empire. You know, we want relations with other countries that are based on equality under international law. We want to use diplomacy rather than arms to resolve conflicts. And that means getting out of these, there's 7 endless wars we're now involved in, withdrawing from over 800 foreign military bases, cutting the military budget way down, and going to other countries. We may not like their governmental systems, but we got to deal with them as they are. You know, climate change. You know, China and Russia, like Trump's America, are big problems in terms of fossil fuels extraction and use. And, you know, we need to get with them if we're going to solve this problem we were just talking about. And then we got this nuclear arms race. I mean, nothing else matters if we don't stop that before we blow ourselves up. And we're lucky to still be here. I mean, I've read a recent book by Daniel Ellsberg and another one by Fred Kaplan and an older one by Scott Ritter. Man, we are so lucky to still be here. And nobody's talking about this. You know, none of the presidential candidates, they don't have a program for it. You know, Biden, the lesser evil, was participant in the nuclear modernization program initiated under Obama and continued under Trump, which now other countries have responded to, Russia, China, India. And they're changing their nuclear doctrines. I mean, China and India had a policy of no first use. Now they're saying with these hypersonic strategic nukes, maybe we can't afford that because we might have to launch before we get launched on. Because those nukes are so fast, you can't wait for a sign on your radar. I mean, we're in a big mess, and we need a totally different direction. So I'm with Ed Herman on that. You know, Chomsky's argued that lesser evil thing for a long time. And, you know, the classic case, the lesser evil opens the door to the greater evil. The socialists in Germany supported a conservative von Hindenburg to stop Hitler. And they got what they wanted. Hindenburg won, and then he appointed Hitler chancellor. We can't rely on the Democrats to fight the right or militarism. And so I think Edward Herman was right and Chomsky was wrong on that question.
Could you bring agriculture at this point? A lot of people are afraid of supply chain collapse and hunger. And suddenly I know a lot of people trying to grow food in their backyard or the porch. And this morning I did a story about the quote unquote green agricultural revolution that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have forced on Africa. It's been a disaster. Could you expand on what a better and more humanistic environmental foreign policy would mean with regard to global agriculture?
Well, in a lot of these foreign policy things, our best way of being effective in moving other countries is to set a good example ourselves. So how can we tell other countries about human rights when we have the largest prison system in the history of the world? And with this war on drugs, it's been a war on Black and brown communities. And we know from the confessions of John Ehrlichman to Harper's Magazine back in the 90s that that was the whole strategy of the Nixon administration. The war on drugs was a war on black people and a war on the anti-war movement. They go after the anti-war movement for weed, and they go after the black people for heroin, and they knew it was all a lie. Ehrlichman said so. It was a political ploy. And so how can we turn around and talk about human rights abroad? Same with agriculture. Our agriculture is industrialized and corporatized. Our Green New Deal agricultural policy will get the corporations out, deindustrialize agriculture, go to regenerative organic agriculture, which means we got to put working farmers on the land, not corporations, absentee owners. It means we got to subsidize the transition away from biocides and chemical fertilizers. It means we need parity pricing for all agricultural commodities, not just the big ones like corn and soy, but all the fruits and vegetables and the dairy products, so that farmers who are engaged in organic practices are assured of an income above their cost of living. And then we need supply management programs so you're not getting, boom and busts in prices because of gluts or shortages. So if we can do that, then we can say, hey, here's how we can help you in other countries. Right now, we use our trade policy. Look what we did to Mexico. Their ejido system gave a lot of people access to the public land. They had the right of use. And under NAFTA, that land was privatized and agribusiness went in there and bought up the land, and those farmers were forced off the land. A lot of them, up here in upstate New York, they milk the cows, they pick the crops, and their dream is to get a farm up here. They want to be farmers, and they should be, because a lot of the young white folks who's, the kids, they don't want to go into farming, they want to go into something else, and they need to pass them on to new people. There are a lot of Mexicans and Guatemalans and other people in Central America that should be the next generation of farmers in states like New York and other states. So I don't know if I got to the international question, but making foreign agriculture in other countries, like in our country, where a lot of our farmers are basically tenant farmers too, Monsanto and corporate agribusiness, doing that in the other parts of the world is no good either. So if we set an example, so farmers farm the land, and we also treat the farm laborers, living wages, all labor protections, covering them. Then we can talk to other countries about they don't need to be dependent on Bill Gates or Monsanto or whatever corporate trap they're in.
Angela, did you have anything to add? Or should we move on to the next question? Okay, all right. So actually, we have 2 more people with questions left. Kevin's going to make a quick announcement, and then we'll move on to Rebecca McCarthy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if you didn't get enough of Howie and Angela, we're going to have another press conference tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And if you need information on that, contact the Hawkins campaign. There'll be information on our press page about that. That press conference is going to be done by the Hawkins campaign. This one was part of the Green Party's convention. One thing that'll be different tomorrow is that we will have also Spanish language availability. There'll be immediate translation for Spanish language press. And also next week on Thursday, we'll be doing a press conference for Hispanic media. So again, more information will be on the website. And if you want to get on our press list and not on it, contact me. My email is kzeese, my first initial and last name, at howiehawkins.us. Kzeese at howiehawkins.us. We can add you to our press list so you can get as much of Howie and Angela as you want. So talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot for being here.
Great. So next we'll go to Rebecca. Let me get you unmuted. Okay, you should have that.
Yeah, thank you. I just had 2 quick questions. One is, you mentioned that you were in communication with local chapters of the DSA. What is your general, or the Green Party's general communication with DSA like on a statewide and local level, in terms of like, is there any like electoral strategy, like who's running candidates in which district? And then 2, Sort of building on what Monty was saying, you know, Biden's climate plan is obviously not very strong, to say the least. And if Trump does win again through no fault of the Greens, because obviously the Democratic Party is not really, it's not a very active presence at the moment, where do you see the Green Party going? Because we do have this very small window and it sort of shifts based on what happens in like the next year. So what do you see the Green Party turning into if it's like a point where our best option is just damage control and like mitigation?
Well, okay, DSA green relations vary from community to community, state to state. So there's overlap in a lot of places. Greens are members of DSA. DSA used to be, you know, very focused on the Democratic Party. Now there's a debate going on in there. So those who have come from other socialist groups like the International Socialist Organization dissolved, and a lot of them committed to independent politics went into DSA, as have a lot of other people just because they were attracted to DSA after the Sanders campaign. So that debate goes on there, and it just varies from place to place. And as far as climate action, if Trump's elected, you know, we're in the streets, we do resistance, but we also go to the states. I mean, I ran on a Green New Deal for New York State 3 times for governor, and I always said, as New York goes, so goes the nation and the world. New York would be the world's 10th largest economy by GDP, maybe 11th. It can have a big impact. And we think the economic benefits are so attractive in terms of jobs and economic expansion that it'll be attractive to other governments to take that role. So, you know, I think those would be the options. But frankly, I think Trump is toast. I mean, he is. I mean, even his supporters, is the emperor with no clothes, and now they look and they say, yeah, actually he is naked. They're beginning to see it.
Okay, then that brings us to David. Let me get you unmuted. Go ahead, David.
Hello again, David Rockello, killradio.org. Starting with Angela, will you, both of you, be pursuing the Jesse Ventura endorsement? And what can you say about mending fences and bridge building with the folks, the delegates that didn't vote for you today?
Hold on. All right, I put myself on mute because my neighbors are basically really partying right now. So I don't know if y'all can hear that. But as far as attracting people who supported Mr. Ventura, just sticking with issues. And you know, some people can't be appeased, and that's fine. We did not get into this expecting that there would be some universal hand-holding, kumbaya, you know, rainbows and sprinkles type of support. So as far as mending fences, we will continue to run the same positive campaign that we have, making sure that we are getting issues into people's hands, that the content that we are putting out is policy related and empowering to the communities that are receiving it. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, we ran a positive campaign, the whole campaign. Everybody running against us been negative. A lot of it was just full out BS. The rigging we know about was against us. And we're not going to say who or what. We're going to take that up internally in the party. We're not going to put our business out on the street. And, you know, there are people who have broken trust and have attacked the Green Party. And while their supporters, you know, maybe some people were bamboozled by some of these candidates, sure, they're welcome. But some of the ringleaders in this thing, I mean, they've shown their hand. And You know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You know, we ain't gonna be suckers for people that don't have the Green Party's best interests at heart.
Good enough.
Great. So I think that's all the questions that we have for today. We want to thank everybody for participating in this. And as you heard, if you need to get the video, you can write to media@gp.org to get a copy of the recording, and go to the howiehawkins.us website so that you can get updates on upcoming press conferences or reach out if you are interested in interviews. Any final words, Angela or Howie?
I just want to say thank you for everyone who is taking their time to be here, who's, you know, our folks who are moderating. Thank y'all for doing this labor. And like we just said, we've run a campaign that we can be proud of up until this point, and we will continue to do that and make sure that we are getting information to our communities that they most desperately need, because right now the Green Party is the only party addressing what people are asking for. And it isn't topical or, you know, we're not green, you know, doing it for popularity. This is who we are. This is who we've always been. And if we ever had our time come around, it's now. And we just need people to know that.
And I would second Angela on thanking the Green Party members that made this possible, made the whole convention possible, and also the media people that showed up. And hopefully we'll be talking to y'all many times as the campaign goes on.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day or evening.
All right. See y'all.
Y'all take care.